Chapter 11. Quo Vadis. Vinicius did not lie down that night, some time after the departure of Petronius, when the groans of his flogged slave could allay neither his rage nor his pain. He collected a crowd of other servants, and though the night was far advanced, rushed forth at the head of those to look for Lygia. He visited the district of Escalene, then the Subura, Vicus Celeratus, and all the adjoining alleys. Passing next around the capital, he went to the island over the bridge of Fabricius. After that, he passed through a part of the Trans-Tiber. But that was a pursuit without object, for himself had no hope of finding Lygia, and if he sought her, it might merely to fill out something a terrible night. In fact, he returned home about daybreak, when the carts and the mules of dealers in vegetables began to appear in the city, and when the bakers were opening their shops. On returning, he gave command to put away Culo's corpse, which no one had ventured to touch. The slave from whom Lygia had been taken he sent to rural prisons, a punishment almost more dreadful than death. Throwing himself at last on a couch in the atrium, he began to think confusedly of how he was to find and seize Lygia. To resign her, to lose her, not to see her again seemed to him impossible, and at this thought alone frenzy took hold of him. For the first time in life the imperious nature of the youthful soldier met resistance, met another unbending will, and he could not understand simply how anyone could have daring to thwart his wishes. Would have chosen to see the world and the city sink in ruins rather than felt of this pursuit. The cup of delight had been snatched from before his lips almost. Hence it seemed to him that something unheard of had happened, something crying to the divine and human laws for vengeance. But first of all, he was unwilling and unable to be reconciled with fate, for neither in life had he so desired anything as Lygia. It seemed to him that he would not exist without her. He could not tell himself what he was to do without her on the morrow, how he was to survive the days following. At the moment he was transported with rage against her, which approached madness. He wanted to have her, to beat her, to drag her by the hair to the cubiculum and gloat over her. Then again he was carried away by a terrible yearning for her voice, her form, her eyes, and he felt that he would be ready to lie at her feet. He called to her, counted his fingers, clasped his head with his hands. He strove with all his might to think calmly about searching for her, and was unable. A thousand methods and means flew through his head, but one wilder than the other. Alas, he thought flashed on him that no one else had intercepted her but Aulus, that in the very case Aulus must know where she was hiding, and he sprang up to run to the house of Aulus. If they will not yield her to him, if they have no fear of his threats, he will go to Caesar, accuse the old general of disobedience, and obtain a sentence of death against him. But before that he will gain from them a confession of where Lygia is. If they give her, even willingly, he will be revenged. They received him, it is true, in their house and nursed him, but that is nothing. With this one injustice they have freed him from every debt of gratitude. Here his vengeful and stubborn soul began to take pleasure at the despair of Pomponia Graecina, when the centurion will bring the death sentence to the old Aulus. He was almost certain that he will get it. Petronius will assist him. Moreover, Caesar never denies anything to his intimates, the Augustians, unless personal dislike or desire enjoys a refusal. Suddenly his heart almost died within him under the influence of this terrible supposition. But if Caesar himself has taken Lygia? All knew that Nero from Tedium sought recreation in night attacks. Even Petronius took part in these amusements. Their main object was to seize women and toss each other on a soldier mantle till she fainted. Even Nero himself on occasions called these expeditions pearl hunts, for it happened in the depth of districts occupied by numerous and needy population. They cut a real pillar of youth and beauty sometimes. Then the sagatio, as they termed the tossing, was changed into a genuine carrying away, and the pearl was sent either to the Palatine or to one of Caesar's numberless villas, or finally Caesar yielded to one of his intimates. So might it happen also with Lygia. Caesar had seen her during the feast, and Vinicius doubted not for an instant that she must have seemed to him the most beautiful woman he had seen yet. How could it be otherwise? It is true that Lygia had been in Nero's own house on the Palatine, and he might have kept her openly, but as Petronius and truly Caesar had not courage in crime and with power to act openly, he chose to act always in secret. This time fear of Poppaea might incline him also to secrecy. It occurred now to the young soldier that Aulus would not have dared, perhaps, to carry off forcibly a girl given him, Vinicius by Caesar. Besides, who will dare? Would that gigantic blue-eyed Lygian who had courage to enter that triclinium and carry her from the feast of his arms? But where would he hide with her? Whither could he take her? No, a slave could not have ventured that far. Hence no one have done the deed except Caesar. As this thought it grew dark in his eyes, and drops of sweat covered his forehead. In that case Lygia was lost to him forever. It was possible to wrest her from the hands of anyone else, but not from the hands of Caesar. Now, with greater truth than ever, could he exclaim, Vae misero me! His imagination represented Lygia in Nero's arms, and for the first time in life he understood that there are thoughts which are simply beyond man's endurance. He knew then, for the first time, how he loved her, and his whole life flashes through the memory of drawing man. So Lygia began to pass through his. He saw her, heard every word of hers, saw her at the fountain, saw her at the house of Aulus, at the feast, felt her near him, felt the odor of her hair, the warmth of her body, the delight of the kisses which at the feast he had pressed on her innocent lips. She seemed to him 100 times sweeter, more beautiful, more desired than ever, 100 times more than the only one that the one chosen from among all mortals and divinities. And when he thought that all this which had become so fixed in his heart, which has become his blood and life, might be possessed by Nero, a pain seized him which was purely physical, and so piercing that he wanted to beat his head against the wall of the atrium until he should break it. He felt that the might go mad. He would have gone mad beyond doubt, had not vengeance remained to him. As he heard, though, he had thought that he could not live unless he got Lygia. He thought now that he would not die till he had avenged her. This gave him a certain kind of control. I will be like Cassius Chaerea, the slayer of Caligula, said to himself in thinking of Nero. After a while, seizing earth in his hands from the flower vases surrounding the impluvium, he made a dreadful vow to Erebus, Hecate, and his own household lares that he will have vengeance. And he received a sort of consolation. He had at least something to live for, and something with which to fill his nights and days. Then, dropping his idea to visit Aulus, he gave command to bear him to the Palatine. Along the way he concluded that if they could not admit him to Caesar, or if they should try to find weapons on his person, it will be a proof that Caesar had taken Lygia. He had no weapons with him. He had lost presence of mind in general. But as is usual with persons possessed by a single idea, he preserved it in that which concerns his revenge. He did not wish his desire of revenge to fall away prematurely. He wished above all to see Acte, for he expected to learn the truth from her. At moments the hope flashed on him that he might see Ligia also, and that thought I began to tremble. For if Caesar had carried her away without knowledge of whom he was taking, he might return her that day. But after a while he cast aside this supposition. Had there been a wish to return her to him, she would have been sent to yesterday. Acte was the only person who could explain everything, and there was need to see her before others. Convinced of this, he commanded the slaves to hasten, and along the road he thought without order, now of Lygia, now of revenge. He had heard the Egyptian priest of the goddess Pasht could bring disease on whomever they wished, and he determined to learn the means of doing this. In the Orient they had told him too that Jews have certain invocations by which they cover their enemies' bodies with ulcers. He had a number of Jews among his domestic slaves. Hence he promised himself to torture them, and on his return to them divulged the secret. He found most delight, however, in thinking of a short Roman sword which let out a stream of blood, such as had gushed from Caius Caligula, and made ineffable stains on the column of the portico. He was ready to exterminate all Rome, and had vengeful gods promised that all people should die except him and Lygia, he would have accepted the promise. In front of the ark he regained presence of mind, and thought, when he saw the Praetorian guard, if they make the least difficulty in admitting me, they will prove that Lygia is in the palace by the will of Caesar. But the chief of centurions smiled at him with a friendly manner, then advanced a number of steps and said, "A greeting, noble tribune. If thou desire to give an obeisance to Caesar, thou hast found an unfortunate moment. I do not think that thou wilt be able to see him." "What has happened?" inquired Vinicius. "The infant Augusta fell ill yesterday on a sudden. Caesar and the August Poppaea are attending her with physicians whom they have summoned from the whole city." This was an important event. When that daughter was born to him, Caesar was simply wild from delight, and received her with extra humanum gaudium. Previous to the Senate had committed the womb of Poppaea to the gods with the utmost solemnity. A votive offering was made at Antium, where the delivery took place. Splendid games were celebrated, and besides a temple was erected to the fortitudes. Nero, unable to be moderate in anything, loved the infant beyond measure. To Poppaea the child was dear also, even for this. That is, strengthened her position and made her influence irresistible. The fate of the whole empire might depend on the health and life of the infant Augusta. But Vinicius was so occupied with himself, his own case, and his love, that without paying attention to the news of the centurion, he answered, "I only wish to see Acte," and he passed in. But Acte was occupied also near the child, and he had to wait a long time to see her. She came only about midday, with a face pale and worried, which grew paler still at the sight of Vinicius. "Acte," cried Vinicius, seizing her hand and drawing her to the middle of the atrium. "Where is Lygia?" "I wanted to ask thee touching that," answered she, looking at him in the eyes with reproach. But through he had promised himself to inquire of her calmly, he pressed his head with his hands again, and said with a face distorted by pain and anger, "She is gone. She was taken from me on the way." After a while, however, he recovered, and thrusting his face up to Acte, said through his set of teeth, "Acte, if life be dear to thee, if thou wish not to cause misfortune which thou art unable even to imagine, answer me truly, did Caesar take her?" Caesar did not leave the palace yesterday." "But the shade of thy mother, by all the gods, is she not in the palace?" "But the shade of my mother, Marcus, she is not in the palace, and Caesar did not intercept her. The infant Augusta is ill since yesterday, and Nero has not left her cradle." Vinicius drew breath. That which had seemed so terrible ceased to threaten him. "Ah, then," said he, sitting on the bench and clenching his fist, "Aulus intercepted her, and in that case woe to him. Aulus Plautius was here this morning. He could not see me, for I was occupied with the child, but he inquired to Epaphroditus and others of Caesar's servants touching Lygia, and told them that he will come again to see me. He wished to turn suspicions from himself. If he knew not what happened, he would have come to seek Lygia in my house. He left a few words on the table, from which thou wilt see that, knowing Lygia to have been taken from his house by Caesar at thy request, and that of Petronius, he expected that she will be sent to thee. And this morning early she was at thy house, where they told him what had happened. When she had said this, she went to the cubiculum and returned soon to the tablet which Aulus had left. Vinicius read the tablet and was silent, as Actus seemed to read the thoughts on his gloomy face, for she said after a while, "No, Marcus, that has happened which Lygia herself wished." "It was known to thee that she wished to flee," burst out Vinicius. "I knew that she will not become thy concubine." She looked at him with her misty eyes almost sternly. "And thou, what hast thou been all thy life?" "I was a slave, first of all." But Vinicius did not cease to be enraged. Caesar had given him Lygia, hence he had no need to inquire what she had been before. He would find her, even under the earth, and he would do what he liked with her. He would, indeed, she should be his concubine. He will give command to flog her as often as he pleased. Qué mal nacido. If she grew distasteful to him, he will give her the lowest of his slaves, or he will command her to turn handmill on his lands in Africa. He will seek her out now, and find her only to bend her, trample her, and conquer her. And growing more and more excited, he lost every sense of measure, to the degree that even Acte saw that he was promising more than he could execute, that he was talking because of pain and anger. She might have even compassion on him, but his extravagance exhausted her patience, and at last she inquired what he had come to her. Vinicius did not find an answer immediately. He had come to her because he wished to come, because he judged that she will give him information. But really he had come to Caesar, and not being able to see him, he came to her. Lygia, by fleeing, opposed the will of Caesar. Hence he will implore her to give him an order to search her throughout the city and the empire, even if it came to using for that purpose all the legions, and to ransacking in return every house within Roman dominion. Petronius will support his prayer, and the search will begin from that day. "Have a care," answered Acte, "lest thou lose her forever for the moment she is found, at command of Caesar." Vinicius wrinkled his brows. "What does that mean?" inquired he. "Listen to me, Marcus. Yesterday Lygia and I were in the gardens here, and we met Poppaea with the infant Augusta, born by the African woman Lilith. In the evening the child fell ill, and Lilith insists that she was bewitched, and that foreign woman whom they meet in the garden bewitched her. Should the child recover, they will forget this, but in the opposite case Poppaea will be the first to accuse Lygia of witchcraft, and wherever she is found, there will be no rescue for her." A moment of silence followed. Then Vinicius said, "But perhaps she did bewitch her, and has bewitched me. Lilith repeats that the child began to cry the moment she carried her past us, and really the child did begin to cry. It is certain that she was sick when they took her out of the garden. Marcus, sick for Lygia whenever it might be pleased thee, but till the infant Augusta recovers, speak not of her to Caesar, or thou wilt bring on her Poppaea's vengeance. Her eyes have wept enough because of thee already, and may all the gods guard her poor head." "Dost thou love her, Acte?" inquired Vinicius gloomily. "Yes, I love her." And tears glittered in the eyes of the freed woman. "Thou lovest her because she has not repaid thee with hatred, as she has me, Acte looked at him as for the first. Acte looked at him for a time, as if hesitating, for as if wishing to learn if he spoke sincerely. Then she said, "O blind and passionate man, she loved thee." Vinicius sprang up under the influence of those words, as if possessed. "It is not true." She hated him. How could Acte know? Will Ligia make a confession hereafter one day, acquaintance? What love is that which prefers wandering, the disgrace of poverty, the uncertainty of tomorrow, or a shameful death even, to a wreath bedecked house in which a lover is waiting with a feast? It is better for him not to hear such things, for he is already to go mad. He will not have given that girl for all the Caesar's treasures, and she fled. What kind of love is that which dreads delight and gives pain? Who can understand it? Who can fathom it? Were, were it not the were it not for the hope that she will find her, he would sink a sword in himself. Love surrenders, it does not take away. There were moments at the house of Aulus when he himself believed in the near happiness, but now he knows that she hated him, that she hates him, and will die with hatred in her heart. But Acte, usually mild and timid, burst forth in her turn with indignation. How had he tried to win Ligia? Instead of bowing before Aulus and Pomponia to get her, he took the child away from her parents by stratagem. He wanted to make not a wife but a concubine of her, the foster daughter of an honorable house, and the daughter of a king. He had brought to this abode of crime and infamy. He defiled her innocent eyes with the sight of a shameful feast. He acted with her as with a wanton. He had forgotten the house of Aulus and Pomponia Graecina, who had reared Ligia. Had he not sense enough to understand that there are women different from Nigidia or Calvinia Crispillina or Porpeia, or from all those women, from all those who he meets in Caesar's house? Did he not understand at once, on seeing Ligia, that she is an honest maiden who prefers death to infamy? Whence does he know what kind? Whence does he know what kind of gods she worships, and whether they are not purer and better than the wanton Venus and than Isis, worshipped by the profligate women of Rome? No, Ligia had made no confession to her, but she said that she looked for rescue to him, to Vinicius. She has hope that he will obtain for her permission from his Caesar to return home, that he will restore her to Pomponia. And while speaking of this, Ligia blushed like a maiden who loves and trusts. Ligia's heart beat for him, but he, Vinicius, had terrified and offended her, had made her indignant. Let him seek her now with the abbot Caesar's soldiers, but let him know that, should Pompeia's child die, suspicion will fall on Ligia, whose destruction will then be inevitable. Emotion began to force its way through the anger and pain of Vinicius. The information that he was loved by Ligia shook him to the depth of his soul. He remembered her in Aulus' garden, when she was lying to his words with blushes on her face and her eyes full of light. It seems to him that she had begun to love him. And all at once, at that thought, a feeling of certain happiness embraced him 100 times greater than that which he desired. He thought he might give won her gradually, and besides, as one loving him, she will have wreathed his dollar, rubbed it with wolf's fat, and then sat as his wife, with his heart on the sheepskin. He will have heard from her mouth the sacramental, "Where thou art, Caius, there I am, Caia." And she would have been his forever. Why did he not act thus? True, he had been ready so to act, but now she is gone, and it might be impossible to find her. It should he find her, and should he find her, fuck, perhaps he will cause her death, and should he not cause her death, neither she nor Aulus nor Pomponia Graecina will favor him. Here anger raised the hair on his head again, but his anger turned now not against the house of Aulus or Lygia, but against Petronius. Petronius was to blame for everything. Had he not been for Lygia, who would not have been forced to wander, she would she would be his betrothed, and no danger would have been hanging over her head. But now all is past, and it is too late to correct the evil which will not yield to correction.